Well, hello there. My name is John Allen. I am the associate editor of Crux and the Boston Globe. And it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight to the launch event for Crux here in Rome. And I want to extend that welcome not just to all of us here in the room, but to those of us who are following this event over live stream, courtesy of our friends at Rome Reports. So in whatever way you're joining us here tonight, virtual or physical, thank you for being part of the scene. Prima di tutto, una parola in italiano per I nostri amici italiani che stanno qui stasera. Siete molto benvenuti in questa piccola isola americana nel cuore di Roma. Anche se, e mi dispiace per questo, anche se parleremo stasera in inglese, siamo molto riconoscenti per la vostra presenza. Quindi ascoltatemi ragazzi, di cuore, e di un cuore abbastanza italianizzato. Grazie a tutti. I will explain the details of the program in a minute. In a moment, Monsignor James Recchio of the North American College will acknowledge several of the dignitaries and VIPs who are here tonight. At the moment, suffice it for me to say that I am overwhelmed and humbled and thrilled that so many of you would choose to be with us here tonight, particularly at a time when I am well aware that this is not exactly the only thing going on at Rome. And so the fact that you would carve time out of your schedules to be here tonight is astonishing. Listen, Crux and the Boston Globe are grateful to all of you for being here. On a personal level, I am beyond grateful. I am personally and permanently in your debt. Now, many of you in this room have been friends of mine for a long time. You know I have already been in your debt for, since forever. But in any event, I am even more so because of your presence here tonight. So thank you. At this stage, it is my pleasure to welcome to the podium, on behalf of the North American College, the rector, Monsignor James Recchio. Monsignor Recchio.
On behalf of the entire North American College community, welcome to this first International Crux Gathering. I was happy to be able to say yes to John Allen when he called to ask about the college hosting this discussion this evening on Pope Francis and his effect on the Catholic Church and the world, featuring Cardinal Timothy Dolan, our beloved former rector from 1994 to 2001, and Cardinal George Pell, who as Archbishop of Sydney was likewise a faithful supporter and promoter of this college's programs. All three of these men are well known by us all and everyone in the church. Since its recent inauguration, Crux reporting by John Allen, Inez San Martin, and Michael O'Loughlin have certainly made an early mark for itself, serving as a national and international source of Catholic news, but particularly through its coverage of Pope Francis, who seems to have captivated the attention of the whole world. To our many dear guests who join us this evening, especially from the Diplomatic Corps, here in great numbers this evening, thank you for your presence. In addition, some of our visiting prelates are present this evening from the United States, including Cardinal O'Malley, Cardinal Wuerl, Archbishop Kurtz, Archbishop Skurla, Bishop Bransfield, and as well as Archbishop Hart from Melbourne. As a mini commercial for our many guests who aren't so familiar with the North American College, the seminary of this college is home to 254 students from 101 dioceses in the United States, and also includes 9 Australian students, seminarians, and 3 Canadian seminarians. We're in our 4th year at full capacity. Our graduate house, the Casa Santa Maria, down in the historic center of Rome, has 64 priests involved in graduate studies, while 33 priests live here with us each semester on sabbatical program. We're delighted that so many of our priests and seminarians have the chance to be in Rome for priestly formation, where every Catholic should feel at home, obviously, and close to the saints and believers who throughout these past 2,000 years who are so visible all over this holy city, consecrated by the blood of the martyrs and by the sweat of so many exemplary men and women of our church, as are many of you. So we're delighted you would join us here this evening, and please enjoy. Welcome.
As I mentioned a moment ago, this is the Rome launch for Crux. We actually had a launch event in Boston on the 11th of September. Our featured speaker that evening was Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston. Cardinal, again, thank you. By the way, you sparkled that night. You rocked the house. It was terrific. So thank you for what you did for us. We have a very brief video kind of giving you an overview of what the Crux project is about. So at this stage, if I could ask that the curtain be opened and we fire up the video, that would be terrific.
So in a recent poll, a fifth of Americans checked none when questioned about religious preference.
Cardinal Bergoglio of Argentina becoming the first Pope Francis.
You were raised as a Catholic. What are your feelings toward the church?
Will anyone still believe in God in 50 years?
Raising questions about the power of prayer.
It is time to rewrite political pundits and perhaps your understanding of American Catholics.
A lot of people probably don't realize that for millions of people, the Catholic Church plays a central role in their lives. It shapes how they see the world, how they engage with family and coworkers and friends, the decisions they make, how they volunteer their time. It's vitally important for everyone in this country to understand the role that the church has, whether you're a part of it or whether you're living in a society that is definitely shaped by it.
Think about what the Vatican kind of rolls up. I mean, it's history, and it's politics, and it's intrigue, and it's mystery, and it's romance, and it's the deepest passions of the human heart, all kind of packaged in one endlessly fascinating Broadway show.
We're going to be fair, we're going to be open, we're going to let people express their views. But there is so much more to Catholicism than just those things that divide us. The Catholic Church has done a fantastic job on social issues, for example. Social justice is really front and center in the Catholic Church.
They don't have to be Catholic, they don't have to be a believer, they don't have to be, they can be, you know, a Buddhist, a Sufi, whatever they are. I think there's an interest in people's faith life.
Glad to know the Broadway show soundbite played well, always does. Ladies and gentlemen, we have, of course, a stellar cast of characters with us here tonight, but it is now my pleasure to introduce the gentleman who, in my world, is the most important figure I will present to you here tonight, because it is the man who signs my paychecks. I want to introduce you to give you a sense of what Crux is about in its relationship with the Boston Globe. It's my honor to present my boss, Brian McGrory, editor of the Boston Globe.
Thank you, John. I'm still kind of chuckling. Somebody outside asked me, are you John Allen's boss? And I didn't know how to tell them that there's a really complicated answer to that simple question. I don't think anybody is John Allen's boss. I think we're all here tonight to see if he can finally come out of his shell and lose some of that shyness he has. Nights like this, I wish I had a time machine, and if I did, I'd love to travel back to 1968 to the Sacred Heart Grammar School in Boston that I attended, because I would love to let Sister Rose know that even though she didn't think very much of me at that time and never thought I would amount to anything, that someday, some 45 years later, I would stand on a stage in the shadow of the Vatican with some of the most influential cardinals in the church. I am beyond honored to be here, and the Globe is beyond honored that you all came here to see what we have tonight. We're particularly grateful to the North American College for hosting us. Thank you very much. To Cardinal Pell, of course, and Cardinal Dolan for taking part in the panel discussion. What we really are, though, is beyond excited about the launch of Crux, which is our new website devoted to Catholicism. It's an unconventional endeavor for the Boston Globe, or really any major American news organization. But in this era of renewed fascination with Pope Francis and the Catholic Church, we saw the need for more journalism. And in that need, we saw the opportunity to matter to a broad and important readership. And the way we plan to matter is to be journalistically pure, meaning we want to be straight down the middle. We will not have an ideological bent to this site, but nor will the site flinch from deeply ideological issues, stories, and debates. Our intent, our goal is to cover the Vatican like no other news organization in the English language. And to that end, we have hired John Allen, who for my money is the best English-speaking correspondent covering the Vatican. We've also hired, and I'm incredibly proud of her, Inez San Martin, an Argentinian national who moved to Rome for this project and did incredible work organizing this event tonight. Catholicism, though, goes far beyond the Holy See, and it goes far beyond the hot-button issues of the church. And to that end, we will cover as closely as possible the social justice issues that the Pope is focusing on around the world: war, peace, inequality, philanthropy. We also understand that Catholicism goes beyond the walls of the parish church and beyond even Sundays. And to that end, we will cover how Catholicism permeates the everyday lives of everyday people. We have hired Michael O'Loughlin, an amazingly talented young reporter, to cover Catholicism around the country. And we have hired Marjorie Egan, a spirituality columnist who has spent her adult life exploring what Catholicism means to her and has a singular ability to write about it. We're also graced with an uncommonly talented editor in Teresa Hannafin, who is back in Boston this evening, who is bringing this all together, somewhat like it's all like a symphony, and she is coordinating it in a really meaningful way at the early stages of this website. So I want to thank you for coming here, and I want to thank John and the Cardinals, and we hope it's and expect it will be a fascinating night. Thank you very much.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we arrive at what is for me the most arduous point of the evening, because I am going to be presenting our star attractions tonight, Cardinals George Pell and Timothy Dolan, both of whom are figures in the church that I have known for the better part of 20 years. Whole oceans have been drained to produce the ink I have written about each of these two men. And so to condense all of that into a 30-second presentation of each is going to be a bit of an ordeal, but we'll see what I can do. Cardinal George Pell is, of course, the former Archbishop of Melbourne in Sydney, and after that, the former Cardinal Archbishop of Sydney in Australia. He is now the Secretary of the Economy for Pope Francis, charged with the mission of reorganizing, modernizing, injecting transparency and accountability into the Holy See's financial operations, working in close collaboration with the new Council for the Economy, and obviously, of course, in close collaboration with the Holy Father himself, for whom this project of financial reform is a keenly personal interest and concern. And I suspect Cardinal Pell may have something to say to us about that. Cardinal Timothy Dolan, what do I say about a man with whom I produced a 300-word book, whose every other phrase is the kind of soundbite that you feel like an idiot for not recording? Let me give you just one window into the wit and wisdom of Cardinal Timothy Dolan. We are, of course, in the baseball playoffs in the United States at the moment. When Cardinal Dolan was still Archbishop Dolan and appointed the new shepherd of New York, you need to know about Timothy Dolan that he grew up in St. Louis, listening to Harry Carey back in the day, called the Cardinals games on KMOX. So when he blew into New York, he was asked by an intrepid television journalist who thought they were going to put him on the spot, Archbishop Dolan, you're a St. Louis guy. If the Cardinals and the Yankees ever play one another in the World Series, what are you going to do? You remember your answer? Said, without missing a beat, his answer was, under those circumstances, I would become the first pro-choice Archbishop of New York. Cardinal Timothy Dolan is, of course, as we've heard from Monsignor Cecchio, he is the former rector of the North American College and still a beloved figure here. You were actually, do you remember, you were also my first appointment in Rome when I blew in here as a cub reporter, and I came away thinking, my God, is everyone in Rome going to be like this? He was subsequently made an auxiliary bishop in St. Louis, then became the Archbishop of Milwaukee, and of course now leads one of the most complex archdioceses, certainly in the United States, and arguably anywhere in the world, in the Archdiocese of New York. So Cardinal Pell is going to speak first, then he will be followed by Cardinal. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you their eminences, Cardinals George Pell and Timothy Dolan.
To John, to the rector, Monsignor Cecchio, to my brother bishops and brothers and sisters. I'm very pleased to be here at the North American College, and as someone who has had, I think, one student when I was Archbishop of Melbourne, and then quite a number of students as Archbishop of Sydney, I'd like to acknowledge my debt and our Australian debt to the North American College. Our students are here, of course, because generally Australians and we call all of you Yanks, people from the States, we get on well, but more importantly than that, I send people here because of the quality of the formation, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I don't want to disappoint John too much because I have said I will take questions on the matter, but I'm off the leash just at the moment with this synod, so I won't be talking about money in the few little comments that I do propose to make. There's always an element of risk and uncertainty in any interaction between perhaps senior church people and the media. I remember Archbishop Carey, Archbishop of Canterbury. It is a slightly far-fetched, but he claims that an English archbishop came to New York and was being interviewed and was asked what he was going to see and this and that, and he was asked whether he was going to visit any houses of ill repute. And he replied, parried it, he thought very nicely by saying, are there houses of ill repute in New York? And apparently the headline, according to the Archbishop, the headline was, Archbishop's first inquiry. Are there houses of ill repute in New York? So I thought a bit about saying yes tonight. But when I was in Australia, I regularly took John's material. The other man I followed, I don't want to upset anyone else who's here from the Vaticaniste, was Sandra Magister. But I relied on them during my absences to try to get some idea of what might be happening. But I'm here tonight for basically one reason, and it's simply because of my respect for the competence, the independence, the integrity, and the industry of John Allen. He's truthful, and he is not used as an ideological instrument. Now, I don't want to destroy John's good standing with the right-thinking people, so I must add immediately that I don't share all these theological opinions. But I certainly share some of them. One of those is to encourage dialogue and discussion, perhaps even debate, within the Catholic Church. One of our leading public intellectuals in Australia said for 400 years Catholics fought the Protestants. For 40 years after the Council, unfortunately, in many cases we fought one another. And now most of that has settled down, and so we realize we're part of a broader coalition, you might call Judeo-Christian, for entering into the serious dialogue. There's the serious tension is now between those of us who share that viewpoint and a small, aggressive minority who would like to dismantle that. I know John wants the church to dialogue with the wider world, so do I. John is keen to spread an awareness of the amount of persecution of Christians around the world. That is extraordinary, and what is equally extraordinary is how little about it is publicly acknowledged and recognized. I was very grateful, to be a little bit cynical. I think it was in Syria, perhaps in Iraq, where Catholics were being persecuted and harried and chased out of their homes. But there was also a small religious minority there. So it was quite politically acceptable to say that this small minority was being treated outrageously, and to add the fact that there was a number of Catholics too who outnumbered them enormously. And I share his ambition that the Catholic Church remains as an active participant in the struggles and in the dialogue in the public square. Now, a few people, mistakenly ambitious, I believe, at least in Australia, probably in the States, would like to exclude us from the public square. I was never one to accept that. I think the answer is very, very simple. We just keep talking. Talking publicly and well. The role of a great national newspaper, of course, is quite different from that of a Catholic journal. Even within the church, what might be suitable in a primary school is a bit different from what's in a high school. It's different again from what is in a seminary, different from what might be in a Catholic university at an undergraduate or postgraduate, and then a secular university. The realm of freedom, I think, steadily increases, and if I could be politically incorrect, the tolerance of the level of heresy expands considerably as you move up that level. But that's not the role of a newspaper in a religiously neutral society. And they, of course, will cover, as has been said, a whole variety of Catholic views, religious, anti-religious, irreligious views. And we need to, speaking on behalf of the Church, we need to be in there too. A free press is absolutely essential in a free society, in a democracy. Sometimes it can be uncomfortably close to the bone, but there's no substitute for a free and independent media section. So we need to be there as courteous people, informed, knowing the idiom, able to present our case. I was delighted to hear John's boss explain that crooks will be, I think, what was the word? I think he said journalistically pure. I hope it will be a genuine forum with a wide embrace, that it won't be imprisoned by any form of correctness, certainly not political correctness. That it won't try to close down discussion on topics, some of them which are very dear to us, such as marriage and family and human life and Islam and justice, and the list could go on. I believe there are some students from the North American College here, as well as quite a number of priests on doing a refresher course and younger priests. So I want to digress, perhaps especially for the seminarians who happen to be here. And that is to say that for 13 years I had a small Sunday column in an Australian newspaper which had the widest circulation of any paper in Australia. I'm very proud of that, and was very grateful of the invitation, which I didn't seek, to come and participate and to write every week. I mean, it is a bit of a relief not to be going around like a magpie looking for something different to say on next Sunday. So my advice to the young priests, with even the priests on sabbatical, but certainly to the seminarians, is to go and do likewise, or sponsor others to do it. Generally, we will be welcomed if we can write well enough, if we're prepared to argue our case, and perhaps even provoke a bit of a fuss. I was regularly encouraged to create a bit of controversy, and I said, well, as Archbishop of Sydney, perhaps unfortunately, my scope to do that is severely limited. But of course, if you say something that people notice, it's better than saying a load of sensible things that nobody takes any notice of. So to all the priests here, especially to all the seminarians here, to all those who would be bishops or are bishops, I hope you're not going to be one of those priests or bishops whose primary ambition is to keep out of the press. Who feel that if they've done that, they've achieved what they're about. If we are silent, we can't complain that we're not being heard. I think one special task we all have, and I speak particularly about the English-speaking world, it might be a bit less true about the United States, which is one of the most religious societies in history. Australia isn't a very religious place at all, and I felt one of our jobs was to keep God in the news. I thought it was always a mistake to regularly speak as though we were agnostics, or that we were too embarrassed to speak about God or about Christ. And there are loads of other people apart from priests and bishops that need to be out there talking and working and explaining. And I think there's a group, I believe it started in London, called Catholic Voices. It was put together when Pope Benedict XVI was going to Britain, and there was waves and waves of criticism, which changed dramatically when the Holy Father arrived. This group was put together, often young graduates. They were trained and prepared so they could get out and spread the message. And we've done something very similar to that in Australia. I feel it's completely useful and perhaps even necessary today, not just for the traditional media, but also in the world of the social media, to have young people who will be prepared, and older people, of course, to defend our point of view. I believe that the United States of America cannot be understood properly without recognizing the contribution of Christianity. first of all, with Protestantism, and now increasingly also with Catholicism. I suspect that the United States is a more anti-Catholic society than Australia. We've never had a Catholic church burned by a mob in Australia. We're more relaxed and indifferent rather than hostile. The United States can't be understood without the Enlightenment, and I believe it can't be understood without the French Revolution. It is a powerful and vibrant society, and I've said already, and I repeat because I believe it is true and sometimes unacknowledged, that the United States is one of the most religious societies in history. But even in the United States, there's a lot of social capital is being run down. I followed these things a little bit. I'm immensely grateful to Cardinal Dolan for giving us all a copy. I think I finished up with 3 copies of Mary Eberstedt's book, Adam and Eve After the Pill, speaking about the sexual revolution and its repercussions. I really invite you to read it. I think it's a marvelous book. Especially in the United States amongst the working class people, already we're in a situation of radical disarray in family life. Radical disarray, quite different from the other sections of the society in the United States. And of course that radical disarray is exacerbating the problems of poverty and of suffering. So I believe, and I'm speaking now very much as a Catholic bishop up on my pulpit, I believe that our society desperately needs what we Catholics and what we Christians have to offer. And I think that this opportunity that Crooks has given, first of all to Catholics in the United States, is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us to use. We should be grateful for it. I'm sure they have reasons, good journalistic reasons, but we also should be grateful too. So I would urge you all, as someone who loves the United States, who recognizes the predominantly powerful influence of the United States in the English-speaking world, I hope and I pray that Catholics in the States will grasp with both hands the opportunities that are being offered by this new possibility from the Boston Globe, the Crooks. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's an honor and a joy to be with you. 3 little hors d'oeuvres, and then I'll get to the main course. First of all, thanks to the North American College. I love the North American College. Thanks to Monsignor Cecchio, his excellent faculty, and our seminarians and priests. I feel at home here. It's evenings like these that they show us their radiant hospitality, so thank you. Secondly, John, thanks to you. I don't want to gild the lily here. I would say ditto to everything that Cardinal Pell said a lot more eloquently than I ever could. John is one of the more perceptive, wise, insightful commentators today, and I appreciate him very highly. I value his friendship. I look forward to his company. This evening has been worth it. I've never seen John so nervous. And I shared with him why, and he said, "You're right on target." It's because he usually shows up as a guest. He never has to plan something. So this is the most nervous I've seen John Allen since you couldn't find your cigarette lighter that one time at my house. So this is, and thanks to all of you, what a magnificent turnout. You honor John and the Boston Globe and Cardinal Pell and myself. Thank you, Brian, and thanks to the Boston Globe for taking religion seriously. I've often said that although most major newspapers in American cities have a religion section, they don't really seem, with some exceptions, they don't really seem to get people who are skilled in that field. They would never think of hiring somebody for the sports page that doesn't know sports. But yet, more often than not, American newspapers do that for religion. And the Boston Globe has not done that, and they deserve credit from the rest of us. And number three, my third hors d'oeuvre is thanks to Cardinal Pell. It's good to be with you, Cardinal Pell. I've admired him for a long time. This summer, at his invitation, or at least before he got this position, I spent close to 2 weeks in Australia, in both Sydney and Melbourne, and there I experienced firsthand the magnificent fruits of his pastoral leadership and the affection and appreciation with which his people in Australia still hold him. And even though they hated to see him go, his service now to the Church Universal is phenomenal. Now, what John has asked me to do is for 10 or 12 minutes to speak as a pastor from the United States on Pope Francis, okay? So let me try to do that. What I'm going to do is try to sum it up in 2 words, style and substance. The style of Pope Francis and the substance of Pope Francis. Let's start with style. Let's stay with alliteration, okay? Style, I'm going to emphasize his simplicity and his sincerity. We have a successor of Peter who is amazingly simple and extraordinarily sincere. I live on Madison Avenue in Manhattan. You know what Madison Avenue means. That means PR. That means marketing, right? Madison Avenue is almost a synonym for advertising. You don't know how many people in New York on Madison Avenue will come up to me and say, Cardinal Dolan, who's doing this man's marketing? Who's coaching this guy? Who's choreographing him? Who's kind of setting up these actions and these initiatives and these movements? And I love to see the look in their eyes when I say, nobody. Nobody's choreographing it for him. He's the essence of simplicity and sincerity. He's not a captive of precedent and protocol. He's his own man. And he's natural and he's spontaneous. And that simplicity and sincerity has gone a long way, folks, to explain what you all have called the Francis factor. Nobody has to tell him, for instance, the day after his election, that he needs to go pay his hotel bill, okay? This is something that a courteous, thoughtful, reliable human being just does, okay? No one needs to tell him or to prompt him on the day after Ash Wednesday, when traditionally the Bishop of Rome meets with his priests, and when they go off to confession, nobody needs to say, you know, Holy Father, it'd really be great. It'd really be a great photo op if you got in line and went to confession. Nobody has to tell him to do that. He wants to do that. It's sincerity. It's simplicity. Nobody has to coach him these days. My first day at the Synod the other day when I arrived at about 20 minutes to 8, I looked down and there he is by himself walking along the side of the Paul VI audience hall carrying his old beat up briefcase, all by himself walking into the Synod. Nobody has to coach him to do that. He's a simple, down-to-earth, sincere pastor. He's spontaneous. He's natural, and people sense it. People know it, okay? And it has brought upon, and this is, John asked me to talk about the Francis factor in the United States. What this has resulted in, everybody, is a phenomenal era of good feeling when it comes to religion, because people like him. They love him. They're fascinated by him. They are intrigued by him. They are curious about him, and people are beginning to get interested in religion. Now, this is particularly providential at a time when religion is caricatured as a source of dishonesty, duplicity, violence, hatred, divisiveness, anger, oppression, bigotry, superstition. This is the caricature we see of religion in enlightened societies, right? And as we look at the front page of our newspapers, we very often seen that religion, we know it's not religion, but religion is the cause of a lot of strife and violence in the world today. How blessed we are to have a man of this simplicity and sincerity who just oozes the genuineness, the nobility, the beauty, the truth, love, and goodness that religion is all about. So that's point number one, his style, a style of magnetic simplicity and sincerity. And secondly would be his substance, everybody. What I would propose to you, after watching him closely now for almost a year and a half, is that his substance is one of proposing to the church a recovered pastoral strategy. And what do I mean by that? What Pope Francis is telling us to do, what's suggesting us, inviting us, hinting at us to do, is to lead with a person. To lead with a person. Not to lead with that person's teaching or moral standards. Oh, are those ever important? And will those soon come along? But he's reminding us that our ability to teach the faith and morals will be much more effective if we don't lead with them, but lead with a person. So we don't start with the doctrine and the rules, we start with a person. Actually, we start with two people, Jesus and his spouse, the church. Francis is inviting us to start with those two people. Now, in a way, and he'd be the first to say this, it's a continuation of the wisdom of Pope John Paul II. Do you remember after the first year of John Paul II's pontificate, there was a French intellectual who wrote, by the name of André Frossard, who wrote a very good biography of John Paul II. And he started off by saying, all the world is saying that we have a pope from Poland. And he says, no, we don't. We have a pope from Palestine. And he says, the world is saying, the critics of Pope John Paul II are saying that he wants to take us back to the 50s. And Frossard said, no, he doesn't. He wants to take us back to the 30s. And not 1930, but 30 AD. He wants to return the church to the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And Pope Francis, this is his pastoral strategy, everybody. Now, who did that best, of course, but Jesus himself. Would you, for a second, think with me, of the pastoral strategy, the substance of Jesus? When he first began his teaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, those disciples who would be the first to be called were curious. They were fishermen, but they were a little distracted by this amazingly fascinating person. They listened, maybe at first just out of curiosity, but gradually they became fascinated, and they listened to him more, and they kind of got a little closer to him. And finally, one of them had the guts to say to him, where do you live? Remember? Where do you live? Now, you priests and seminarians who are studying Scripture will know, they tell me, the scholars tell me, that Semitic phrase, where do you live, would more or less translate into us saying, who do you think you are? Where did you come from? Who are you? And remember what Jesus said? Jesus didn't say, well, I am the eternal Word, the second person of the most blessed Trinity, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, one in being with the Father. No, he didn't say that, nor did he start to teach the Beatitudes at that stage. What did he say? Come and see. Come and see. Get to know me, and then the rest will follow. Now, that's what I would propose to you, is the pastoral strategy of Pope Francis. He's not, by any means, saying that faith, morals, doctrine are not important. He believes they're supremely important. He just thinks they're going to be much more effectively presented if first we invite people to come to know those two persons, Jesus Christ and his spouse, the church. Can I give you a little example, and it's not my own, about somebody who feels the same way? Father Bob Barron, you've heard of Father Barron. He's one of the premier evangelists in the Catholic Church in the United States today. Father Barron is the rector of Our Lady of the Lake Seminary in Mundelein, Chicago. And he will always say that, like a lot of seminaries, he's got seminarians today who did not grow up in the United States. What a blessing they are. So he's got seminarians from Poland and seminarians from Latin America, seminarians from Ukraine. And he insists, get this, he insists, Father Barron does, that they not only just know their theology, that they not only know English well, he insists that they come to know baseball. Because he says, as Ernest Hemingway said, it's impossible to understand American life unless you understand baseball. So he insists that the students understand baseball. So the students will say to him, okay, teach us about baseball. And he says, no, I will meet you at 11 o'clock Sunday morning after Mass, and I will take you to Wrigley Field, and we will watch the Cubs. And he says the guys walk, they see the crowds, they smell the hot dogs, they probably have one, they get a cold beer, they're watching the batting practice, the national anthem, they watch the ball games and the teams, and they're gradually enchanted, and they gradually get into it. And then they begin to ask some questions about the whys and the rules, and why this and why not that. And gradually, Father Barron says he's got him. He's got him, because he says, I don't start with the infield fly rule. I don't start trying to explain what a balk is, he said, because I don't think I understand it, all right? I start with the experience. I get them into the ballpark, and I got them. Because after that, they'll start to ask the questions, and it's easier for me to explain the majesty and the mystery. That, my friends, is what I would propose is the pastoral strategy of Pope Francis, all right? To introduce people, to reintroduce the world, even to reintroduce us in the church to the Father's love, his tenderness, his mercy, his invitation, made incarnate in his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and alive in the church. That I propose, John. I hope I did what you asked. His style is simplicity and sincerity. His substance, don't lead with the chin. Don't lead with controversy. Don't even lead with the mouth. Lead with the heart. And you're going to win a lot more people. Thank you.
Now, outstanding. Thank you both, Cardinal Dolan, Cardinal Pell, both terrific. Listen, we have a number of our colleagues in the Vatican Press Corps who are in the room tonight, and of course we are all actively at work right now covering the Synod of Bishops. Both of you are members of the Synod. So could we begin by asking each of you very briefly to give us a reaction to the first 3 days, maybe the 2 or 3 points that struck you from the discussion, and some perhaps quick thought about what you think it might come up with at the end. Okay, so Cardinal Pell, can I ask you to begin?
Well, if I could be ecclesiastically incorrect, and I think the first thing that I've taken from the first 3 days is the level of trouble we're in. Right around the world with marriage and the family. There are very, very few societies where the trend is running in the direction of a strengthened family life. I've also been impressed by it's just so obvious that the bishops who are there know the world that they've come from, where they are. And, some of the beautiful examples that have been given. One archbishop said how he has day-long meetings for those people who divorced, remarried, whose marital situation is irregular. Some of them can't receive absolution. And he says the bishop is present for the whole of the day, And he says with those people, he kneels with them, and together they ask for God's mercy. It was a very powerful, wonderful individual example. Everybody wants to show God's love and mercy, and of course that brings you to very difficult situations. And as Christians, we follow Jesus. I could confess, perhaps I even might have been tempted to hope that Jesus might have been a little bit softer on divorce. But he wasn't, and I'm sticking with him.
Just wish one of these nights we could get you to stop being so coy. You know, if you just tell us what you think once. Okay. So.
There's your soundbite for Cardinal Pell tomorrow. Cardinal Pell sticks with Jesus.
Yeah.
First of all, you know, if you want to ask about a synod, you ought to ask Cardinal Wuerl. He's been to almost all of them. I've only been to 2 of them. I think Cardinal Pell outranks me too. I find them immensely fascinating. And this one, John, you asked for just a couple. First of all, Cardinal Wuerl and I have had the honor of serving on the permanent council for planning the synod. So we've been involved in this since the conclusion of the last one under Pope Benedict 2 years ago. And we were able, with the encouragement of Pope Francis, to introduce a few little moderations. And I find them very refreshing. First of all, we begin every day with prayer. That's not new. We always did that. And then we begin with a conference on God's Word. All right, so just for 2 or 3 minutes. So we're beginning with prayer, God's Word. Listen to one of the lay observers, a married couple. So right off the bat, they share for 5 minutes their reflections on the topic of the day, and then we begin. Now, I find that methodology to be very refreshing, and in itself very teaching. That the pastors of the world are first of all asking God's help, listening to God, listening to their people, and then listening to one another. So there's my first. Secondly would be an amplification of what Cardinal Pell said. The bishops of the world, at times, they can move me to tears because they're pastors. They're pastors. They know their people well, they know their country well, they know the situation well, and they're speaking with immense love and tenderness about their people, especially their broken people. And it bothers us. It moves us when we see people who are outside the church. It moves them. It moves my brother bishops when they know this and when they're trying. It moves them, like in the United States. It moves Archbishop Kurtz and Cardinal Wuerl and Archbishop Skirl and I, who are from the United States, to know that only 50% of our young people even approach the sacrament of marriage. That bothers us, that challenges us. What you don't find, though, and I would find this to be very uplifting, so far, Cardinal Wuerl, Cardinal Pell, even though there is this gritty realism and complete and utter bluntness about the pastoral challenges we got, you don't detect much hand-wringing. You don't detect a lot of pessimism or gloom. There's a sense of God's presence. There's a trust in His grace and direction. There's a beautiful openness to Pope Francis. And there seems to be, in spite of the candor about the pastoral challenges that we face with marriage and the family, to which Cardinal Pell referred, there's not a sense of panic or pessimism. And I find that, it's only been 3 days, but I find that to be very, very refreshing.
All right, well, to extend tonight's baseball metaphor, next up in our batting order would be the Rome and Vatican correspondent of Crux and the Boston Globe, Inez San Martin. And before I hand you the microphone, well, yeah, you can take his. Let me just explain to you that I met Inez when shortly after the election of Pope Francis, I went down to Argentina to do some reporting on the new Pope. Now, you know, in 20 years in this business, I've gone to many places where I've had to look for what we in the journalism business call a fixer, meaning somebody who can help us, you know, with the language and meet people and so on. And by far, the best fixer I ever had over the course of those 20 years was this young woman in Argentina who sounded to me like she must have grown up in the States. Turns out she learned her English from watching Castle on American TV, which to me raises some questions about her aesthetic taste, but certainly not her command of the language. And so, yeah. So when we started this project, she was the obvious choice to be the Rome correspondent for this new project. So, Inez, you're up.
Thank you very much, John, for embarrassing me to death, so now I can actually ask my question.
How do you think I felt with these two?
What I wanted to ask is, you both have mentioned that you have learned very interesting things during these 3 first days of the Synod. I would very much like to know what is the most interesting thing you've learned, from where you've learned it, and speaking as a journalist covering the Synod, if you can actually give me the name of whom you learned it from, I would probably, you know, do something very nice. I don't know. I'd be very thankful for that.
Well, I went first last time. Let's hear what the Cardinal said.
Inez, let's see. You mean something new that I learned, or something that I've been impressed with, or?
Something that you didn't expect.
Well, I will tell you this, and I listen, this is positive, but now I'm going to have to get Cardinal Pell. Was it today the bishop that spoke to us about the study done in his country? And I think it was Latvia, was it not? The bishop in Latvia, Cardinal Wuerl, spoke about the study done in his country with this terribly dismal statistic of 86% of marriages ending in divorce. So, you know, here we go, oh my, crying time again. And then he says, phase 2 of the study, only 14% of those marriages, of the couples who were married in church, end up in divorce. So he said, all of a sudden in Latvia, we have this renewed sense by people who never give the church a nod, who never have much good to say about the church, who are really only looking at things from a sociological or an economic point of view, who are saying, maybe we ought to look at what they're doing. They have success here. What is the church doing to prepare these couples? What gifts do the couples bring to to marriage that make them 86% of their marriages persevere, while 86% of people outside the church are crumbling? I found that to be very revealing.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I would certainly agree with that. I suppose I was a bit surprised by the high figures, but that ties in with most sociological research on the advantages of being married and being religiously practicing and being Catholic. Perhaps the thing that's, if I could return to a theme I touched on, perhaps the thing that most struck me has been the involvement of the bishops in the lives of their people, and of the many different ways in which they're working to bring God's love and healing to people. And to hear a variety of challenges, but they're very, very similar in most societies, and even in societies like Africa. Obviously, they're very different, but the challenges amongst their leaders and elite are similar to ours. I'd agree there's no hand-wringing. There's no feeling that we're beaten or done. I always think of the ancient Roman Empire. It was immensely more hostile to Christianity than our present situation. They had none of the advantages that we have. No sympathetic Boston Globe. No great colleges, etc., etc. And they didn't do too badly.
All right, so next up is our cleanup hitter, Michael O'Loughlin. Now, unlike Inez, who I had known before she came into Crux, I was simply told by our editor at the Globe, Teresa Hannafin, that we had picked up this new national correspondent by the name of Michael O'Loughlin. And so I looked at the first couple of pieces he filed, and I assumed we were dealing with some 50 or 60-year-old seasoned journalist who had been around the block and, had developed all these contacts and insights and so on. I meet this guy, he looks like he's 14 years old, but nevertheless, accomplished beyond his years, believe me. So, Michael, floor's yours.
Great, thank you, John. Cardinal Dolan, my question is for you.
Sure.
Picking up on your talk about style and substance, we were told at the press briefing yesterday that some bishops in the synod expressed some concerns about language that some church leaders and some Catholics use. And we were told these phrases included things like living in sin or intrinsically disordered, and that bishops were hoping to move away from that language. And I'm wondering how you think that might relate to Pope Francis's "who am I to judge" question, and maybe more close to home, your recent decision to serve as Grand Marshal of New York City's St. Patrick's Day Parade, even with the parade organizers' decision to allow an openly gay group to march this year.
Thanks, Michael. The question of language has been a biggie in Cardinal World, and I know that that's been a biggie for the last 2 years, ever since we found the topic, even the cardinals on the permanent council. It's a question of the consistency of the church's truth, the immutability of the church's truth, but our burning desire to find a language that can present it in a more gracious, compelling, cogent way. Somewhat similar to what Pope St. John XXIII said. Remember when he opened up the Second Vatican Council? When he said, look, the doctrine of the church is immutable, but we can repackage it and represent it in different ways. So, Michael, there's the overriding question about language. And the bishops are very candid in speaking about some basics, some fundamentals of our Catholic vocabulary that we want to cling to and we want to present in a more persuasive way than ever that don't seem to have much cachet anymore. Let me use the phrase, for instance, the natural law. The natural law is a magnificent concept that the church didn't make up. It comes from our philosophers. It comes from the most wise observers of human nature ever. They come up, when you're talking about Aristotle, and they come up with this magnificent phrase, the natural law. But we've kind of admitted that although the natural law is there and we count on it and we can never disregard it, it's fundamental, the phrase itself doesn't seem to have much sway in our contemporary society. So, Michael, you are right. The whole question of language. Now, I don't want you to think, and I think Cardinal Pell will back me up, people are not, when we talk about some type of renewal and reform of our vocabulary, they don't mean to soften it to dilute the teaching. They almost mean to kind of find better ways to say it to make our teaching more credible and more cogent. So it's not a code word for sidestepping tough things. It's more of a methodology to try to find a new vocabulary. And Pope Francis is modeling that in many ways. So, yeah, language has been a biggie, hasn't it, Cardinal? But were you going to ask him the same thing, Mike? I have a tendency to take over here, so I didn't know if you were going to ask him.
Yeah, but would you mind actually answering the question he asked, which was, does that desire to find a new language and a new approach to make the teaching more credible, was that part of what was in your thought process when you made the decision about the St. Pat's Parade?
That's a little more complicated because the invitation to be Grand Marshal anteceded that decision. So it wasn't like I decided thinking, oh good, I can use this to make the statement. So their decision was subsequent. I could have backed out, that's for sure, but I didn't. And in my attempt to explain it, I said, well, yeah, so I guess you're right, Michael. Maybe this is an attempt to recast and represent the teaching of the church. I said, as long as I've been assured that no group is going to be marching that would be advocating something contrary to the Catholic wisdom and tradition that has always been part of the St. Patrick's Day Parade, I'm comfortable being Grand Marshal, and I've been assured that's the case. These are people simply marching about an identity, not promoting actions to which I would take exception. So yeah, I guess, Michael, my decision not to back away may have been an approach. They too, I have to say that although we had kind of a heated dialogue with the organizers of the St. Patrick's Day Parade, because I thought the old policy was pretty good. People of same-sex attraction were never excluded from the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Nobody could identify themselves as anything but Irish, so it wasn't really anti-gay. That was just. But so when I got beyond that, I was moved with the leaders of the parade, almost all Catholic, saying we were worried that some people were interpreting this as an exclusion and as a bigotry against gay people, which they said we also know would be contrary to Catholic teaching if we read the Catechism properly. So they knew that actions, whether hetero or homosexual, outside of marriage, were contrary to God's revelation, and that was clear. That's Catholic teaching that everybody seems to know. They worried that also the next line of the Catechism, that people with same-sex attraction need to be treated with dignity and respect and never excluded. They worried that that aspect of Catholic teaching was being questioned. And while they knew that was a misinterpretation, because they too thought there was wisdom to the old way, they thought maybe this will be a better way to do it. So there you go again, vocabulary, language, you're right.
Cardinal, did you want to say anything on that or no?
No, except of course that I'd basically agree. What the language you would use in an academic seminar is different from what you would probably use in a sermon, and what you might do sitting around, as we say, a common room discussing these things. But even the sort of language that would work, that would people under 20 would be able to understand, is probably significantly different from the language that a group of people my age would accept. And there's no doubt about it. You can hear religious people speaking sometimes, and you can say immediately, you know, they're off the wavelength. They might have a wonderful message, but the way they're presenting it is not going to work in these situations. Underneath that, of course, we've got to be intellectually coherent and consistent, and there's nothing that prevents us from using, from doing that, striving for that. Catholics are people who stand under the Scriptures. We are people of tradition, but you know, we believe in the development of doctrine, but not in doctrinal backflips.
You're just a soundbite machine tonight. You're on fire. Listen, I know I promised both of you that I would have you out of here by 8:45, but do you have the patience for one more question before I wrap up? Both of you were, of course, in the conclave that elected Papa Bergoglio, Pope Francis. And I'm certainly not going to ask you to violate the confidentiality that you enter into about that process, but I think it is safe to ask you this question.
I knew John was going to say but.
Yeah, it's the Allen but. The question is this. You obviously were part of the conversations that led up to this result, and you obviously took a careful look at this man, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Is this what you thought you were going to get on March 13th, 2013, or are you as surprised as the rest of us are in some respects?
I started last time.
All
right. Let me divide up my answer. I think it's no secret that in the pre-conclave meetings, the cardinals made it clear they wanted improvements in the management of the money and the administration here. They wanted the public scandals. They wanted it, to overstate it, slightly cleaned up. And I was pretty certain that Pope Francis would back that, and he's backed us magnificently. We couldn't do what we were doing without that.
Follow up? You said you were certain he was going to do it. Were you certain he was going to ask you to do it?
No, definitely not. I'm the last man standing. I was for 7 or 8 years on the committee of 15 that was supposed to be overlooking the Vatican finances. The only thing was absolutely clear is we didn't really know what was going on. And the other people who batted for years with me have retired. Seriously, Cardinal Meissner told me he worked for 23 years to try to improve things. Cardinal Mahoney, Cardinal Francis, George, Rocco Varela in Madrid, and they're all retired. And I'm here. No idea, I had no idea he was going to do that. If anybody had said 18 months or so ago that I'd be running the finances here, I would have thought they were slightly off key.
Thanks, sir.
Same question, John?
Yeah, did you think he was going to call you?
No.
Phone hasn't rung yet, has it?
You haven't looked at New York's finances yet. Surprised, not surprised on one thing, a little surprised on the other. Not surprised on what he's doing at all. As Cardinal Pell hinted, this is a man that listened very closely to the meetings of what we call the congregation, which is the meetings prior to the conclave, which this was the first time Cardinal Pell has been in one. I never was. Cardinal Wuerl, you weren't in. This was your first time, too. Cardinal O'Malley, you had been in one before, or no? No. I was getting a little patient at the first couple days of the congregation. I said, come on, let's get to the conclave. What are we doing? Now, it gradually became apparent to me that this was extraordinarily important, not only to get to know each other, but the issues are vented. And it's very clear to me Cardinal Bergoglio listened intently, and he's doing it. So that doesn't surprise me at all. And he tells us that. If you listen to his interviews, he will say, nobody's surprised if you knew what was talked about in the congregation. What does surprise me is I see him as a very hiring behind-the-scenes man. In no way did I think of him as charismatic, somebody who was going to electrify the crowds. And he's obviously done that. But that gets back to my first point about his simplicity and sincerity. He's just himself, and it's electrifying. And so that surprises me. And I remember at World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro, when I was with somebody who knew him very well in Argentina, and when we watched his entrance, some of you were there, with those 2 million young people lining the route as he came in and out of the Pope Mobile and visiting with people. And I remember this bishop that knew him well from Argentina saying, this isn't the Jorge Bergoglio I knew, okay, who could see that something electrified, magnetic. So people that knew him better than I thought that he was a very shy, retiring man, and thanks be to God, he's a man that just is magnetic and moves people. That's a bit of a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, for once you failed to use your own best soundbite, if I may say. So can I quote you to yourself again? You told me once that when Bergoglio walked out as Pope, you know you were getting a good manager and you know you were getting a good pastor. You didn't know you were electing a rock star.
Yeah,
right?
True.
Yeah. Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the show we have for you this evening. Now, can I please invite all of you, if you've not yet done so, please go on to the Crux website. It is www.cruxnow.com. I guarantee you, no matter what kind of Catholic you are, you will find some things to delight you and some things that drive you absolutely insane, and that, of course, is part of the point. We want to include all voices. But at a bare minimum, I think it is an example of a secular mainstream news organization that is trying to take the Catholic story seriously, and we would love to have you come along for the ride. Would you please join me in thanking our two rock stars here tonight, Cardinal George Pell, Cardinal Timothy Dolan. And one final matter of housekeeping. For those of you who are joining us for dinner tonight, including, by the way, the two of you, can we please make our way outside as quickly as possible? Thank you.